Mythic Plus. The high-end dungeon content in World of Warcraft is extremely polarizing. It's punishing, it has a timer, tanking's a nightmare apparently. Hello everybody, I am Jmulls of Jmulls Gaming, and in this video I want to go over my thoughts on Mythic Plus as someone who has next to no experience with the mode. I hear all the time in various videos that Blizzard should make changes, systemic ones at that, to Mythic Plus as a system in order to appeal to new players, to draw in more people to play the mode, especially now that delves exist as an option. But a lot of the times I hear opinions from people that have extensive experience with Mythic Plus. It's their bread and butter, they love the mode, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just I thought I would offer my own experience, my own opinions about Mythic Plus as a system, and why it's always been off-putting to me conceptually, and why it's always been a mode that I've just never had a strong desire to dive into. Well, what's my history with Mythic Plus? Because this is like the anti-resume for this video. I think I ran a +3 Temple of Sithralis back in BFA, I think so. I know I ran a temple, I just don't remember what keystone it was specifically. It could have been a +4, could have been a +3, something like that. Maybe even a +2, who knows? It's a mystery, and I want to get something out of the way here. I am not saying my opinion remotely matters about Mythic Plus, nor am I saying that Blizzard should listen to me for specifics on what to alter or change when it concerns Mythic Plus, because simply I don't have that experience to be able to make those claims concerning Mythic Plus. I can only provide my perspective as to why it's been such a wall that I've had no desire to climb. This conversation surrounding Mythic Plus and what can they do to change it and the things they need to do to change it. Stuff like tank scarcity when it comes to getting keys done and all that. The difficulty, the timer, dying, tank busters, the whole steak and potatoes. To me, they're more symptoms of a deeper design philosophy that I just don't find particularly compelling when it comes to video games. And that is the idea of punishment being the idea. I am not going to make the claim that Mythic Plus isn't hard. It's a system that is designed to get harder and harder the higher your key is. So at some point, it will be difficult. Maybe a +1 or a +4 may not be difficult for experienced players, but eventually you'll find that key that is, by just nature of the actual system. But for me, the wall when it comes to Mythic Plus, and the thing that's made me never want to really touch it that much, the system seems to be advertised on the idea of its punishment. Sure, the timer behind this system is a large component for that, but I don't think it's the only main culprit. A bunch of affixes that historically have never sounded that fun or compelling to interface with, and just felt as if they padded the timeout or included or introduced artificial difficulty into these dungeons. Stuff like just buffing numbers and stuff like that. On top of having to time the key, but also if you fail the key, your key gets depleted. Now they're starting to pivot in that direction when it comes to 11.1, and they just talked about, hey, if you have all your keystones for each of the dungeon +12 and you've done them, it won't deplete past that point, which sounds good for the high end, but I've always been of the opinion and the perspective that the people really struggling with key depletion, or at least the perception of key depletion, has been those under that limit, especially in a system that a lot of people try and pug. The idea that someone else can have an internet mess up, like get disconnected, or they just lag, or something happens IRL, like they need to take a phone call or something like that, or they get distracted, and you die and you potentially brick your key, that is really off-putting, especially in a multiplayer game. It's off-putting to me even in single-player games, but especially in a multiplayer game that just sounds like, hey, roll the dice if you want to waste your time or not. It doesn't make the content sound fun or compelling or engaging, making me salivate chomping at the bit to interface with this content and really sink my claws into it. It makes me just never want to look at it. And I think this is especially true with the War Within, with the introduction of delves. For a lot of high-end players, if you're rocking +12s or even higher than that, like +15s or +16s, you're probably looking at delves and laughing your butt off, going like, what the heck is this? It's so easy. Like a blind monkey with like one paw could probably slap the keyboard and still clear that content, especially if you have a bunch of great gear. And while in 11.1 they're going to incentivize doing delves at higher than just a +8, I think one of the reasons that so many people have gravitated to delves as a system is because it offers the benefits of the game mode behind Mythic Plus, but without the punishment. When it comes to Mythic Plus, the stars kind of need to align for that system to look really appealing. The gear needs to be really good, the dungeons need to be a bunch of fun, but also also need to be hyper replayable with interesting mechanics. The affixes need to not be a pain in the balls. Rarely have I ever looked at a Mythic Plus affix and thought, oh, that looks like a ton of fun. So the best case scenario, in my perspective at least, is which affix looks the least annoying to deal with. And then you also just have to deal with the random element of playing with other people. Whereas for delves, I get content that gets progressively harder, but I can choose what version of delves I go after. I can choose to run +8s. If I want to test my luck and go higher than that, I can do that. But if I fail, it's just a failure, and I can run it back. I can try again. That's not the case when it comes to Mythic Plus, because the key depletes, or I lose the group. Then I have to spend more time trying to find a group, hypothetically speaking. Chances are my key is worse off now, so I have to run essentially a different dungeon, and run that whole process over again. I think Mythic Plus conceptually is far too designed with the idea of being punishing rather than fun and engaging and exciting. Sure, most of the time when you do delves, they're not going to be particularly challenging or that difficult. However, depending on your gear, they can offer a decent challenge, but also something to do solo. So the 3 big modes of PvE content in this game right now, raiding, delves, Mythic Plus, one of those is designed to be heavily punishing, where you can also be set back, whereas the other 2, raiding and delves, they don't have that. They don't have that sword of Damocles holding itself over them, always waiting to strike and drop right on your head. If you die to a raid fight, you can just run it again. It's not like, hey, you died to heroic, before you can try this again, go run a normal mode, right? Like, it's not asking you to do that, because that would be silly, especially in a multiplayer environment. And there will always be people out there that like design that is punishing. There's nothing wrong with that. People like what they like. But to the same idea that people like what they like, people also dislike what they dislike. And I dislike design that is meant to be severely punishing like that. Death to me is sufficient. Failing to clear the boss is sufficient when it comes to punishment. I failed to overcome this challenge. I want to try again. It's one of the reasons I love Souls games or games that have a difficulty like that, because I can just run it immediately again. If for whatever reason I die in a delve, I get a few extra lives so I can just come back and try it again. But even if for some reason I brick the delve, I can just leave, go right back in, and try again. And if I'm on a fresh alt that is not geared enough, I can lower the difficulty to what I specifically want and feel comfortable with, run it then, and then when I feel comfortable going above that, I can then go there. It puts the agency in my hands instead of instilling this, like, baked-in fear of failure. Because I think well-designed, difficult content is designed with the idea that when you fail, you go, okay, lost here, that was a failure, what did I do wrong, or what did we do wrong, how can we do this better, okay, let's try again. The goal, the idea, in my opinion, should be that it should inspire you to want to try again, to improve from your mistakes, to overcome that challenge and reap the rewards of doing so. But again, perception is key, and that's something I always talk about on this channel. When it comes to Mythic Plus, the perception behind that entire system is that, oh cool, I failed, I wasted my time, my group's out the window, I'm left with this busted ass key, the healer's crying in the corner, the failed druid's in the sandbox. But not only that, you take into consideration the state of balance in the game, so you have all those issues we just talked about. People in an online game playing with other people want to minimize the chance of failure because, duh, no one wants to waste their time, so they become hyper-selective on who they pick, which leads to more and more people taking meta specs, or at least specs, that are perceived to be way better than the others. So you have this feeling in the back of your mind, at least, that, hey, if I'm not one of these tip-top specs, what am I doing? And if you spend a significant time looking for groups to do Mythic Plus, and you just don't get accepted, and then when you do, maybe you make it far into the key, maybe you don't, but at some point you will feel the cold sting of the punishment behind Mythic Plus conceptually. You'll probably lose that group, you'll probably lose that key, or you get a key that is perceived to be worse than others if certain dungeons just have this perception that they're exceedingly difficult, or they're just exceedingly difficult and no one wants to run that key, in which case, better luck next time. It's a system that has so many points along its path to success that just lead to frustration and punishment instead of engaging, rewarding gameplay or encouragement. At what point in the Mythic Plus experience does the game ever encourage you to go again, outside of a point of success? when you come across a failure point, the game has to double down, twist the knife, and throw salt in the wound while spitting in your eye. And some people will like that, and that's not meant to be a joke or anything. There are some people that genuinely enjoy a punishing game. May not be for me, and I don't understand that mentality, but it's a mentality that exists. And if Blizzard genuinely wants that mode to be like that, then I don't think that's inherently wrong so long as there's options for other people to play. And that's what we have with the War Within, with the introduction of Delves. Now in the War Within and going into the future, because Delves aren't going anywhere, hopefully, you have a bunch of people that used to run Mythic Plus because they felt they had to for gear. But now they can just run Delves or raiding, or they can just go do high-end PvP if they really want to. And now, funnily enough, in 11.1, with the renown track that raiding is about to get, raiding is going to look even more exciting and fun and interesting and rewarding. Because if you fail a raid fight, it doesn't knock the difficulty down to the rank below you and say, do this first, then come back. You can choose to go again. And maybe you lose out on some consumables. That's also applicable for all the other modes, though. Even then, in the next raid with 11.1, with the renown track, they're adding ways to mitigate the sting of death when it comes to losing consumable buffs. It's the opposite design philosophy that Mythic Plus has. And while it's all well and good, when you look at these changes for 11.1 for Mythic Plus, like I talked about before, if you've done all your dungeons at a plus 12, they won't drop below that. That's all well and good. What about below that, though? That's going to be where the majority of your player base is. Those are the people that would like that system. And I don't think there's a simple fix when it comes to Mythic Plus. There's not like one change you can implement, and then all of a sudden people in droves that never interacted with the system before will feel incentivized and will feel a desire to run that system. I don't think there's any one change you can make, because it's a philosophy behind the system, behind its conception, that it's meant to be exceedingly punishing instead of rewarding and encouraging. We can talk about removing the timer. We can talk about removing key depletion. And maybe that is a conversation that should be had, but again, I don't have much experience with Mythic Plus, so I don't want to go into specifics because I lack the foundational knowledge to really talk about specifics. I can only talk about why I haven't interfaced with the content and what has been preventing me from wanting to do so. And it's that overall design philosophy Mythic Plus has, to be overly punishing instead of rewarding or encouraging. And maybe there's ways to augment Mythic Plus to feel rewarding and encouraging, even along points of failure, that don't involve removing the timer, or maybe even key depletion, though I personally would not mind if they just removed key depletion, stuff like that. But we can argue about the specifics of these features all we want. I think the overlying issue with this system is what these ideas represent to the player, or at least to me, because I know there's people out there that absolutely adore Mythic Plus. And are there like smaller changes that could be made to bolster numbers? I'm sure there are. We have seen more people interface with the system when it's traditionally an easier season, or at least a perceived easier season. I would argue that's partly because when a season is easier, running the risk of a bunch of punishment becomes lessened. But I think it's an interesting discussion, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Comment down below with if you've never played Mythic Plus before, why not? Do you agree with me, or is there another element, another pillar to Mythic Plus that you just find wholly off-putting? Or if you love Mythic Plus, it's your bread and butter, and you absolutely adore it, again, nothing wrong with that, but I'd love to know why. And what do you believe they could change or do to make it feel more welcoming or exciting or engaging and make new players want to dive in and interface with that content? I'd love to hear your thoughts, hear your opinions, and hear your perspectives. So thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure for making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and help support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe, have a great day, go play some video games, and I'll see you all next time. Bye bye everybody, until we meet again.